1,000-foot tall fires. We never try to touch 1/3 of the railings or try to force the market, force vacancies. We never missed the mortgage payment. Once again, never given the keys back to any property, and have always operated within the bounds of propriety. And we've established a really successful reputation in business in the city. And then last year happened. And I don't think anyone really, I think from the owner-investor standpoint, it's very difficult, I think, no offense to Peter and to Derek, and to feel what we feel, because you're operating transitionally through assets, and you don't have to stick around to see what happens. So we have a much more pessimistic outlook on the market. I'll be the Debbie Downer right now. This round of regulation hit harder and further and deeper than anyone really thought, because when you just take the face of it and you look at the actual second and third order of effects from the changes in the IAI, to especially the changes in the IAI, the outlook in terms of due diligence or expectations, it really does completely affect. We are now looking at our own assets right now, and just so you know, we just recapitalized the 1,400 unit rent stabilized portfolio in the New York metro area. Why? Because we still are at the heart of it believers in the New York market. Our value add strategy basically went to a core strategy, right? We've modified our return expectations. We found an excellent partner that's a long-term hold strategy. They own properties all over the world. They came into this with the same outlook that we did, that at the end of the day, as Sam Lafrac always said, there's always more asses than toilet seats in New York. And as long as the economy drives people to live here, there will always be high housing demand. What that does, though, is that changes our entire outlook on our management, as Peter was alluding to, which is we're closer to keeping our properties clean, keeping our properties well maintained, doing the work that's absolutely necessary. We will never let a building go into disarray. But then again, we are not going to. I think I can speak for pretty most owners in here. We're not going to go and shoot the lights out. We are going to maintain our boilers. We're going to maintain our common areas, our front doors. We're going to make sure the door always locks. We're going to make sure the buildings are safe. They're well lit, and they're still proud. Places that people are proud to call home. But we're not. There's no nonsense about roof decks or amenities or targeting higher income renters or trying to go for market rents. In a sense, we don't even want apartments back. We just want to keep you happy and satisfied in your home. Because if we get it back, there's really not a whole lot we can do with it. The cost of renovating an apartment, just to get the increase, not even counting the loss to market, the loss to lease, is just, it's like a 30-year payback. I don't really think there's a whole lot of investments out there that anyone would target that would say, oh, that's a 30-year payback, I'm going to do it. Unless it's your 401k. So that's really kind of it. In terms of looking at new properties, we're still looking. We are keeping our eye on the markets that we're familiar with. We call them bolt-ons, anything that's in and around something that we already own. We think is a good opportunity because there are some economies of scale that we can bring to it, but with that same sort of investment thesis and looking at projections and pro formas, we are looking at rent rolls that have a significant free market component, knowing what kind of risk that puts us at. If say there's a big glut, well, there is a big glut in condos, broken condos in the luxury market, that's going to suck people out that have the income and the ability to move to higher end markets. They're going to create a vacancy in our free market rent rolls in apartments that we own. But it really, the free market aspect sort of has to flow the rent stabilized. We are now treating rent stabilized apartments in projections as basically rent, what we used to treat rent control, basically writing it off. We have to split the rent stabilized apartments in a rent roll, and we have to look at it almost on a unit by unit basis. We just had this conversation yesterday. It's almost you have to have a business plan for each apartment. What's the apartment renting for? What could you rent it for if you got it back? Is there a preferential rent in place that you could extinguish immediately and then set it on a trajectory from there? Or is it basically just a complete loss? Because if you get it back, you're just going to negative numbers. But surprisingly, there are properties out there that we're looking at and that we are bidding on that can sustain, a much lower return threshold than used to be, but it is still there and it's still positive. That doesn't mean I'm necessarily the most optimistic in the market, because I think that there's not a whole lot of opportunities to do that right now. We are looking at the debt markets. We're looking at a lot of the paper that's put out there that took a lot higher risk on trying to, God forbid, if you try to do a condo plan in the last 2 years, you're in trouble, because I don't think the market was there for that to begin with. But if you're holding on to a portfolio that has a condo, predicated on some type of condo conversion, you're in really deep doo-doo, and we're going to start looking at your portfolio from that regard. But we are looking at we are talking to lenders, we are talking to brokers, we are talking to anyone out there who knows if there's a property owner who needs to offload the property to a socially responsible good operator like us that can take the keys, take the opportunity, and create a nice housing and necessity type environment. So we are looking at that. We're also, it drove us to go outside New York. So we're investing. We have been, sort of saw a little of this coming. We've been investing in outside New York for the last couple of years. Now we're even more energized to target other markets where we can apply our trade. I mean, our business can manage anything, and it can manage it out of the New York metro area with the way technologies and software systems and management systems and maintenance systems that we use. We can basically do it from the moon. So we're looking at other markets, and we're energized about trying to find value trapped in markets that we wouldn't have ordinarily looked at. So that's actually pretty exciting. I think I think what's happening here is the big picture, and I'm supposed to be giving some insight to investors, so I'm going to go a little bit broader, because I heard something yesterday on my commute home that was interesting. I don't know if you guys paid attention, but the CEO of BlackRock made a public announcement yesterday that is significantly, wanted to make sure that everybody heard it. And it's something we have a lot of institutional investors and private equity that have invested with us, and a lot of those investors are, because of the type of housing that we've invested in and because of our reputation, are socially responsible investment groups. So they're pension funds, education and municipal pension funds, religious faith-based pension fund groups, and other people that cannot. They have a mandate, or they cannot touch the rails. They have to stay, and they're just socially governed to invest in socially responsible and sustainable investment. And we've seen this. We've been a player in this area. But BlackRock came out yesterday and said that they are going to cut out full swaths of industries, portions of industries. They're going to downsize certain industries that are not in what they call ESG, which is environmental, social, and governance, which is basically call it a sustainable type of investment. And that's not just placating the wave of sort of liberal socialist government, what's going on in our social media and what's going on in government these days. It is, and you listen to the CEO of BlackRock, And I've been to ESG conferences. This is real, right? And why it's real is because economists report after report after report has basically showed that sustainable investing, whether it's in social, diversity, environmental, right? The returns are higher. The returns are higher because they are sustainable over the long run. And BlackRock is saying, and BlackRock they're saying that we're not doing this because we're goody two-shoes. We're not doing this because we're placating the AOCs of the world. We're doing this because our clients are demanding a higher return. And I think what's unfortunate is that the New York State government did not see this coming. They ignored it completely. They ignored this wave of sustainable investment, whether it's energy efficiency, diversity, climate change investing. Right? They ignored it. And what they did was they took the common denominator of greed being the common denominator as opposed to incentivizing socially responsible investing as the common denominator. I know that sounds complicated, but I thought of that on the train this morning coming in, of what I could say today. And so you have this movement of capital, right? Capital drives everything. I don't care what anybody can tweet. Capital drives everything, right? Go to a coffee shop, stand in front of a socialist barista, but they still have a tip jar in front of them. Okay? They're capitalists, right? The New York State has lost this opportunity, and so what's interesting is they could have said, let's try to figure out a way, right, to allow investors to invest in our city, in our state, make healthy returns, and force them to be socially responsible. Because the banks are doing it, right? The banks are forcing their borrowers to do it. Private equity is doing it. The capital markets are demanding a more socially responsible investment thesis behind everything. And the government has basically just tripled down on greed is evil. Instead of saying, how can we incentivize people to invest the right way? Can some of this movement in the capital markets put pressure on Washington, put pressure on the state government, put pressure on the city to start rolling some of these things back? I think so. But have we cut too far in the zone, right, for that to actually be a reality in our lifetimes? What really has to happen, and I hate to say it, is devastation, right? We're going to have to go back to the 70s. The Bronx is going to have to burn again before our government has the strength and bravery to make real changes. When that happens, they're going to have the political cover, and they're going to have the ability to say, these things work. The data's there. Allowing people to invest actually creates better life for everyone. You think about it in terms of like a property owner. If there are people that can't afford to maintain their buildings, that affects the tenants directly. Just things like proper maintenance of your unit, right? What does that do to a tenant? It saves people time. Right? If you don't have any issues that you have to stay home on your last sick day or last personal day before you get fired, right? Because you don't have to worry about the condition of your building or your apartment. That saves you that time. That allows you to stay in work. That allows you to go earn overtime if you have to, because you don't have to rush back to make a maintenance appointment, right? It de-stresses the quality of life. It allows you to think. These are the things that people don't consider at all. They just think it's just trickle-down money. It's not. It's trickle-down time. It's trickle-down stress. It's trickle-down quality of life, right? These are things that just keep me up. So anyway, those are sort of like my insights for the day. Sure.
Thanks, James. And I think your use it in the right way. Look, at Chip, this is something that we've been trying to push for a while now. This is, when we brand ourselves as long-term holders of property. Most of the time, it's generational businesses, family-owned. Realizing value through the natural turnover of apartments. Not pushing people out and trying to maintain a good building, give people who live there a sense of security, a sense of community, and a sense of pride where they live. It's unfortunately that is not the perspective of the industry, and what's happened is there's been this shift in politics where capitalism has been labeled as capitalism is equated to greed. There is no difference. I think we all in this room can agree that that's not true. But that is the soundbite, and that is what we're fighting against every day. So we certainly we haven't given up. We do think that if there's a tough road ahead of us. Hopefully, we will not have to go back to the 70s before we do accomplish any change, but that's definitely a possibility. It's unfortunately many elected officials who are in charge of making decisions are not looking 10 years down the road. They're looking 2 years down the road to their next election, and they're in the business of staying in office, not necessarily looking out for the long-term growth of their district or their city. But we're hoping to get this out there, this thought, this thinking, get it out there in the public, have a real conversation, and hopefully see some change in the future. And I guess now we can open it up to questions from the audience for any of our panelists. I do want to just really say thank you real quick to our panelists. This was really great. This was a nice, well-rounded perspective, lots of different viewpoints. So I do really appreciate everybody putting the time and effort and expertise in being here today. So, questions? Sure.
I just want to ask any of the four panelists what they think will or will not happen with the good cause eviction bill. If anybody has any thoughts on what might or might not happen with it?
So I can speak to that a little bit. I can tell you it's not going away. It still has 25 or so sponsors, individual senators who put their name on the bill. There's a rumor that there are going to be some amendments made to that in the coming weeks. So it's still up in the air. It's still out there. It's something that we're fighting against. Chip, our executive director, has put out he wrote an op-ed on it. The danger is that it's being packaged with other housing bills that are actually probably based on good housing policy. So that it's sort of like a Trojan horse strategy. But we're pushing back. We're talking to electeds about it. We're highlighting the negatives of it. And look, it's unpredictable at this point. But I'll tell you, the tenant advocates are up there already pushing for it.
Yeah. It's a very scary thought because it's a complete total game changer. It goes way beyond what is happening now, and some of the capital that we are partnered with and we speak to on a regular basis, that comes up and it's basically lights out. New York is closed for business, and so some of the things that I touched on is that sort of if that can be felt somewhere in the legislation, that the message is that like money will just be cut off, like just blow up the 59th Street Bridge and all the bridges around Manhattan, you know, like at the end of like, you know, Batman, like it's done. Like the money's just not going to come into housing in New York because there's no, like I said, there's no economic return, and you know, socially sustainable investing has to make a return. So you're just cutting out your nose to spite your face so bad that you're just gonna, you know. So that's the kind of message that has to be delivered hopefully from the capital markets to prevent this.
I also just think it's interesting from a political little jujitsu move. If this was called universal rent control, it would have a much different feedback from the general population. Because if you don't know what it means, but you just hear good cause eviction, there's no emotional response to it. But universal rent control is a different response. So I just think that's interesting that they named it good cause eviction as opposed to universal rent control, which is really what it is. So, because part of this is a PR fight.
Does anyone know what bad cause eviction is? There's no such thing, right? If you've been evicted, it's because of... There is, but if you've been evicted, it's because it's bad, right? There's no such thing as a good cause eviction, right? It's not renewing your rent. I get it, right? But, you know, forget it. Sorry.
Yeah, so with that.
Blow up all the bridges, remember?
What kind of documentation are you kind of required to get yourself comfortable with rents, and how are you underwriting the uncertainty of documentation for New York?
You have to look at every single lease. You have to go back. The paperwork has been an issue for the last several years, but it's even more so now. And it's almost daunting. I mean, like let's just keep in mind, it's like who wants to stick needles in their eyes, right? Or my dad says, who wants to stick peas up your nose? Like, if there's even a whiff that this building hasn't been maintained very well, it's like just retrade on the deal. Get it like just like forget it. If they go for it, go for it. If they don't, we don't have a gun to our head to go and spend 7 hours in your office going through every single lease, really looking for every single piece of paperwork that we can find. I mean, that's just the risk that you're taking.
I would say that when you're diligent, it's become much easier to buy a stabilized building than it is a free market building. So the diligence on a stabilized building, in a way, you've got your risk profile is a lot different on a stabilized than the free market. So all the risk is on the free market. So we put buildings under contract that are completely stabilized in the past 45 days under contract in a week or two. On all of our free market buildings, they're taking at least a month to get under contract. So.
Yeah.
So, Peter's comment, the best guy to feel out there is the rent stable like building no free market apartments, and you just kind of buy it 30-40% discount. Just move forward, buy it at 5 cap, finance it at 5, 3.5, 6, 7, and the upside is not there, but you really have the potential down the road to increase your rents. And one of the things that Peter touched on a little bit is the rent guidelines. I mean, if you read the RGB report, it talks about 20% vacancy, which is gone. Vacancy bonus, which is gone. Deregulation, which is gone. Preference, which are pretty much gone. IAIs, which is significantly limited, and MCIs, which are also significantly limited. So what's the RGB going to do? They're not going to give you a 0 or a 1. They have to give you something so that you can pay your expenses. And if you read the report, you'll only see it.
Yeah, I would add that the people who are buying today, in addition to everything you just said, it's 10 years.
Well, that's why we're going for 10 years.
I'm planning on buying this and holding it for 10 years, and that's a big shift. go lease, they say, like James talked about, and everyone talked about, oh, we're gonna, rehab this building, we're gonna sell it in 3 to 5. There's no one who's buying a building in New York right now planning on holding it for only 3 years, for the most part.
We've done the IRRs on the new NCI calculations. Not bad. We've done it on the IRR and the IRR calculations. Not bad. And if you have a building that's 50% fair market and 50% regulated, you're not getting the IAIs or the NCIs on those 50% of your markets. So that's going to really make it run cost.
On those rent stabilized sales, in the due diligence process, how do you look at registrations all the way back to 1984?
Yeah, everyone's looking at registration, but you're quantifying the risk. So the risk on a stabilized mess up, it may be, it's not going to be a massive amount. If it's a free market miss, it could be I'm taking a rent that's $3,700 a month and bringing it back to $900.
Right.
It's massive, and you've got the treble damages and the PR risk and all that kind of stuff. So it's what we're seeing is, because nobody has a perfect building. There's no building that we've seen that's been 100% perfect. But the buyer is going through an assessment of, well, I know I'm going in with some risk, and I have my eyes open. And yes, in a worst case scenario, this is a $100,000 issue, and over here this could be a $1 million issue. So it's distinguishing between the two.
Peter, you're missing the 1986 registration, that means it's not registered in 86, and you had a $500 rent in 86, and today we're at 2,000. You do the math on that, you're looking at $1,500 a month, travel 6 years. Do the math. Huge.
Yes.
So if I can just provide some insight into one of the questions I was on the board eviction bill. You also mentioned the argument last week on the board of appeals. I was one of the attorneys who argued one of the cases. Right. And so if you watch the argument, you saw the reception by the High Court in terms of they were very disturbed by certain aspects.
Some of them were.
Right, some of them were, which was surprising, I thought, because, again, apart from the fact that they were all formal appointees, you did have at least 3 who were seemingly very disturbed by certain aspects of the retroactivity of the HSTPA and the due process concerns, and you're going to have 2 which are going to make the difference. And so my belief is going to be a 4-3 opinion, and I can't tell you which way it's going to go. But what I do think is that when the legislature watches those arguments and they see the chief judge opening remark about how this is a sea change in the law and cause undue hardship on the landlords, I think that's impactful when the legislatures then go into their session and they draft the language when they see the reception by the High Court. So I can't overemphasize the importance in which lawsuits like which Chip commenced private individuals commence. I think it's important not so much because I believe that these are certainly going to be successful, because it's one of the very few leverages we have. And so when these lawsuits are commenced and when they're receiving the responses from the court, I think the legislature looks at that and they say maybe we can't push it as far as we'd like because we're going to get pushback, and I don't think they want their laws reversed. And so to the extent that individuals and owners and not only an attorney, I'm also, my family also has 1,000 units in Brooklyn. So that's something that we're taking part in, and I know other individuals are taking part in, and I think it's important to the extent that we can to participate to the extent that we can.
Definitely, and it goes to sort of this larger point that Chip is trying to accomplish is I call them third-party validators, right? It's one thing for the housing industry to say, you're killing us, the building's going to fall down in 30 years, there's no capital investment, things are going to get bad, not just bad for us, bad for tenants, bad for the city. When we say it, it's looked at as, fear-mongering, but if the Court of Appeals says it, if there are other, third-party validators, other industries, free market tenants, who's going to